I thought I was losing my mind. That's the first thing I need you to understand. When you see something that shouldn't exist, your brain doesn't just accept it. It fights, it screams. It tries to convince you that you're dreaming or dying or finally snapping under the weight of everything you've been carrying. But I wasn't dreaming. And what I saw that night in my church at 3 a.m. changed everything I thought I knew about God, about creation, about our place in this vast universe. My name is Daniel Hayes. I've been a pastor for 17 years at Cornerstone Fellowship in a small town in Oregon that most people have never heard of. I'm 42 years old, divorced for 3 years now, and I live alone in the small house next to the church. Most nights, I can't sleep. The insomnia started after my marriage fell apart, and it never really left. So I walk. I pray. And sometimes I go sit in the sanctuary because it's the only place where the silence doesn't feel like it's suffocating me. That night, October 19th, 2024, I woke up at 2:45 in the morning, drenched in sweat from another nightmare I couldn't remember. I pulled on my jeans and a jacket and walked across the dew-soaked grass to the church. The building is old, built in 1953, with wooden floors that creak and stained glass windows that look beautiful in daylight, but seem almost menacing in the dark. I had my key ready, but when I reached the door, I noticed something that made my stomach drop. The door was already unlocked. Not just unlocked, but slightly ajar. My first thought was that someone had broken in. We'd had issues with vandalism before. Teenagers looking for a place to drink or whatever else teenagers do when they think nobody's watching. I pushed the door open slowly, my heart hammering in my chest. The sanctuary was dark except for one source of light, and that light was wrong. It wasn't the warm yellow glow of our old light fixtures. It was blue-white, almost like moonlight, but brighter, pulsing with a rhythm that reminded me of breathing. And then I saw him. There was a figure kneeling at the altar. At first, in that half second before my eyes adjusted, I thought it was a person. But as I stood there frozen in the doorway, my hand still on the handle, I realized that what I was looking at couldn't be human. The being was tall, even kneeling, maybe 7 feet if it stood. Its limbs were elongated, graceful in a way that seemed impossible, like the proportions were all wrong, but somehow beautiful. The skin, if you could call it that, was translucent, almost crystalline, and beneath it I could see what looked like light moving through a network of veins or channels. The glow was coming from inside the creature itself. It had a head, shoulders, arms, but the fingers were too long, the joints bent in places where human joints don't exist. And it was weeping. I could see its shoulders shaking, could hear a sound that was something between crying and singing, a melody that made my chest ache with a sadness I didn't understand. The being was praying. Its hands were raised toward the cross above the altar, and it was praying. I should have run. Every instinct in my body was screaming at me to turn around, to get out, to call someone, to do anything except stand there watching. But I couldn't move. I was paralyzed by fear and something else, something I didn't have a name for. Wonder, maybe, or recognition, like some deep part of me knew that I was witnessing something sacred. What you're about to hear has been kept from humanity for thousands of years. I need to warn you, once you understand this truth, your entire view of reality will shatter. This isn't comfortable. This will challenge everything you've been told. But if you're tired of the lies, if you're ready to see what's really happening, you need to subscribe and turn on notifications right now. Because what happened next in that church exposed a truth that will change everything you believe about creation itself. There's no going back after this. The being's prayer grew louder, and I started to understand fragments of what it was saying. Not in English, not in any language I'd ever heard. But somehow, the meaning was transferring directly into my mind. Words about exile, about loneliness, about being the last of something precious that was dying, about searching across the stars for a place where prayer still meant something. And then it said a name I recognized, a name that made my blood run cold and my faith crack open like an egg. It was praying to God, the same God I'd spent 17 years preaching about, the same God whose name I'd invoked at weddings and funerals and Sunday services. This impossible creature from somewhere beyond our world was kneeling in my church at 3 a.m, weeping and praying to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. My hand slipped off the door handle. The sound echoed through the sanctuary like a gunshot. The being's head turned toward me, and I saw its face for the first time. Large eyes that held depths I couldn't comprehend. No nose that I could see. A mouth that seemed to shimmer between existing and not existing. And in those eyes, I saw something that terrified me more than the alienness of its form. I saw recognition, like it had been waiting for me. The being didn't move. It just stared at me with those impossible eyes, and I felt something I'd never experienced before. It was like standing at the edge of an infinite cliff, knowing that one more step would send me falling into a truth I could never come back from. My legs were shaking. My mouth was dry. Every rational part of my brain was telling me to run, to get out of there, to pretend this never happened. But there was another part of me, the part that had dedicated my entire adult life to seeking truth and understanding the divine, that wouldn't let me turn away. I took a step forward, then another. My footsteps echoed on the old wooden floor, each creak sounding impossibly loud in the silence between us. The being remained perfectly still, watching me with impatience that felt ancient, like it had all the time in the world and had learned long ago not to rush anything. When I was about 10 feet away, I stopped. My voice came out as barely a whisper. "What are you?" The being's mouth didn't move, but I heard its voice anyway. Not through my ears, but directly inside my mind. The sensation was overwhelming, like someone had opened a door in my skull and walked right in. The voice was gentle, male in some indefinable way, and carried with it emotions and meanings that went far deeper than words. "My name is Kale," the voice said, and just hearing that name, I felt the weight of distance and time and loneliness that came with it. "I am a traveler from beyond your world, from a place among the stars that your people have names for but have never reached. I mean you no harm, Daniel Hayes. Please, do not be afraid." He knew my name. This creature, this being, this thing that shouldn't exist, knew who I was. My knees almost gave out, and I had to reach out and grip the edge of one of the pews to steady myself. "How do you know my name?" I managed to ask, though my voice was shaking so badly I barely recognized it as my own. "I have been watching your church for 3 cycles of your moon," Kale said. "I have seen you walk here in the night when sleep abandons you. I have heard your prayers when you thought no one was listening. I know your pain, Pastor. I know what it is to feel alone in a vast and uncaring universe." Tears were streaming down my face now, though I didn't remember starting to cry. Everything I'd built my life on, every sermon I'd preached, every comfort I'd offered to grieving families, every assurance I'd given that we were special, that Earth was special, that humanity was the crown of God's creation, it was all crumbling around me. Because here was proof, undeniable proof, that we weren't alone, that God's creation was bigger and stranger than anything I'd ever imagined. "This is impossible," I whispered. "You can't be real. Aliens, they're not. They're not in the Bible. They're not part of God's plan." Cale tilted his head in a gesture that was eerily human despite how alien he looked. "Are you certain of that, Daniel? Your sacred texts speak of beings descending from the heavens in pillars of fire and light. They speak of angels with many eyes and wings, of creatures that inspired both terror and worship. What if some of those encounters were not with angels, but with travelers like me? What if your ancestors simply lacked the words to describe what they were truly seeing?" My mind was reeling. I thought about Ezekiel's wheel within a wheel, about Jacob's ladder, about the star that guided the wise men. What if they weren't metaphors? What if they were exactly what they claimed to be, encounters with something beyond Earth, misunderstood and reframed through the only lens available to ancient people? "Why are you here?" I asked, my voice steadier now even as my worldview continued to fracture. "Why are you in my church? Why are you praying?" Cale's shoulders sagged, and the light within him dimmed slightly. "Because your churches are the only places left in this galaxy where prayer still echoes. Because my people have forgotten the one who made us, and I am searching for a way back to him. Because I have traveled further than you can imagine, seen wonders and horrors beyond counting, and I have learned that some truths are universal across all of creation." He paused, and I felt waves of sorrow radiating from him. "I am dying, Daniel, not in body, but in spirit, and I came to your world because I heard that humans still remember how to pray with their whole hearts. I came because I am desperate for connection with the Creator that my people abandoned millions of years ago." I couldn't speak, couldn't process what I was hearing. This being had crossed the vast emptiness of space, had somehow found Earth among billions of stars, because he wanted to pray, because he was searching for God. "May I continue my prayer?" Kyle asked, and there was such humility in that question, such genuine respect, that I found myself nodding before I even realized what I was doing. "Yes," I said, my voice barely audible. "Yes, please." Cale turned back toward the altar, toward the cross, and raised his two long fingers toward heaven, and he began to pray again, and this time, I listened to every word. The prayer started as a whisper, a sound that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Cale's voice filled the sanctuary, not through the air, but through something deeper, something that resonated in my chest and made the hair on my arms stand up. The words weren't in English, weren't in any language that human tongues could form, but somehow I understood them. The meaning bypassed my ears entirely and went straight into my soul. "Ancient of Days," Cale began, and those 3 words carried more weight than anything I'd ever heard. First flame that burned before the stars' new light, architect of existence, sculptor of dimensions, the one who breathed reality into the void when there was nothing, not even darkness, for darkness itself is something, and you preceded even that. I found myself sinking into the pew behind me, my legs no longer able to hold me up. The theology I'd studied in seminary, the carefully constructed doctrines and systematic frameworks I'd built my faith upon, they all seemed like children's drawings compared to what I was hearing. Cale was describing God in ways I'd never imagined, in concepts that were simultaneously foreign and perfectly, terribly right. I come before you as I have come before, across distances that would break a human mind to comprehend, Kale continued, and his voice cracked with emotion that transcended species. I am Kyle, son of Theron, descendant of the line of light, one of the last who remembers your name among my people, and I am so tired. The light within him pulsed brighter, then dimmed, like a heartbeat struggling to keep rhythm. I watched as something that looked like tears, luminescent in silver, traced down what I thought might be his face. Forgive us, he said, and the anguish in those two words made my own eyes burn with tears. Forgive us for our pride. Forgive us for believing that understanding your creation meant we no longer needed you. Forgive us for thinking that because we could manipulate matter and bend space and conquer death itself, we had somehow become equal to you. We were fools. We are fools. And now we are paying the price of that foolishness with our very souls. I leaned forward, gripping the pew in front of me, completely transfixed. Kale's prayer wasn't recited from memory or performed from ritual. It was raw, desperate, the kind of prayer that only comes from someone who has lost everything and has nowhere else to turn. My people were once like these humans, Kale said, and I realized with a jolt that he was talking about us, about humanity. We once gathered in places of worship. We once sang songs of praise. We once felt your presence in our lives and knew that we were part of something greater than ourselves. We had families and love and purpose and meaning. We had you. His hands trembled as he held them toward the cross. But we grew wise in our own eyes. We discovered the mechanics of your creation and mistook the blueprint for the builder. We learned to read the code of existence and thought that made us the programmers. We achieved immortality of body and called it victory, never realizing we were killing our immortal souls in the process. The temperature in the church seemed to drop, and I could see my breath misting in front of me. But I didn't move. I couldn't move. I was witnessing something that perhaps no other human had ever witnessed, an alien species confession to the same God I'd preached about my entire adult life. Guide me, Kyle pleaded, and his voice was breaking now, fragmenting into something that sounded like static and song and sobbing all at once. Show me how to bring my people back to you. Show me how to make them remember what they've forgotten. Show me how to restore what we've destroyed. I have searched 1,000 worlds, studied 100 religions, observed countless species at every stage of development, and I have learned that the truth I seek was the truth I abandoned. He lowered his head, and the light within him flickered like a candle about to go out. I am afraid, he whispered. I'm afraid that we have gone too far. I'm afraid that we are too broken to be healed. I am afraid that my people are already dead, that we are just corpses that haven't stopped moving yet. I am afraid that I am the last one who even cares enough to ask these questions. The silence that followed was profound and heavy. I watched as Kale knelt there, this being from across the stars, completely vulnerable before the altar of a small church in Oregon. And I understood something that shook me to my core. He had come to Earth not to invade or study or conquer. He had come to pray. He had traveled across unimaginable distances because he heard that on this small blue planet, there were still people who maintained houses of prayer, places where the divine was still welcomed, where the Creator was still called upon. We weren't special because we were God's only children. We were special because we were perhaps the only children who still remembered we had a Father. Save my people, Kale said, his voice barely a whisper now. Or if they are beyond saving, then save me. Let me not die having forgotten your face. Let me not end my existence in the cold darkness my people have chosen. Please, I am begging you. And then he fell silent, waiting for an answer I wasn't sure would come. The silence stretched between us like a living thing. Minutes passed, maybe longer. I'd lost all sense of time. Kale remained motionless at the altar, his inner light pulsing slowly, rhythmically, like the breathing of someone in deep meditation or exhausted sleep. I stayed in my pew, afraid to move, afraid to break whatever sacred moment was unfolding. Finally, Kyle rose. His movements were fluid, graceful in a way that defied the awkward proportions of his form. He turned to face me, and in his eyes I saw something that looked like resignation mixed with a desperate need to be understood. You want to know who my people are, he said, and it wasn't a question. He could sense my thoughts, my burning curiosity mixed with fear. You want to know where we come from and why I'm really here? Yes, I managed to say, my voice hoarse. Tell me everything. Kyle moved toward me slowly, carefully, like he was approaching a frightened animal. He sat in the pew across the aisle from me, and even sitting, he was taller than I was. Up close, I could see the intricate patterns of light moving beneath his skin, like neural pathways or rivers of energy flowing through him. My people call ourselves the Korra, he began. We are old, Daniel, older than your species by millions of years. Our civilization spans 17 star systems in a region of the galaxy you cannot see from Earth. We have colonized 43 worlds. Our population numbers in the hundreds of billions. By every measure your people would use to judge success, we are gods. He paused, and I saw something like bitterness cross his features. But we are dying, not in body. Our bodies live for thousands of years. We have conquered disease, reversed aging, eliminated death itself from natural causes, but we are dying in every way that matters. I don't understand, I said. If you've achieved all that, if you've become immortal, immortality of flesh is not life. Kale interrupted, and his voice carried a weight of sorrow that made my chest ache. It is just existence that continues. My people have learned the cruelest lesson in the universe. You can have everything and still have nothing. He stood and walked to one of the stained glass windows, looking at the image of Jesus with the children. The pre-dawn light was just beginning to filter through, casting colored shadows across his translucent form. We were not always like this, he continued. Millions of your years ago, when my people first achieved consciousness, we were like you. We looked up at the stars and felt wonder. We gathered in sacred places and offered prayers to the one who made us. We had families and love and art and music and all the things that make existence meaningful. We knew God, Daniel. We walked with him just as your ancient texts say humanity once did. What happened? I asked, though part of me already knew the answer. We grew wise in our own eyes, Kale said, echoing the words from his prayer. We began to unlock the secrets of the universe. Physics, biology, consciousness itself. Every discovery felt like pulling back a veil, seeing the machinery underneath creation. And with each revelation, we felt less need for a creator. We thought we were understanding God's mind. What we were really doing was forgetting his face. He turned back to me, and the anguish in his expression was unmistakable. It happened slowly, over thousands of generations. First, the temples emptied. People said they didn't need to pray anymore because they understood how prayer worked, could map the neural pathways and chemical releases it triggered. Then the sacred texts were archived as historical curiosities, interesting mythology from our primitive past. Then we stopped teaching our children about the Creator altogether, because what was the point when we could explain everything through science? And then? I prompted, knowing there was more. And then we replaced God with ourselves, Cale said quietly. We began to worship our own intelligence, our own achievements, our own power. We built monuments to our greatest scientists instead of temples to our Creator. We sang songs about the triumph of reason over superstition. We congratulated ourselves for outgrowing the need for divine guidance. We thought we had evolved beyond faith. He moved back toward the altar, reaching out to touch the wooden cross with one long finger. But evolution does not mean improvement, Daniel. It just means change. And we changed into something hollow, something empty. We achieved technological godhood and lost our souls in the process. You said you're one of the last believers, I said. How many of you are left? Fewer than 1,000 out of hundreds of billions, Cale replied, and the numbers hit me like a physical blow. We are called the remnant. We are mocked, pitied, sometimes persecuted. My people look at us the way you might look at adults who still believe in fairy tales. They cannot understand why we cling to ancient superstitions when we have unlocked the secrets of reality itself. But you haven't unlocked everything, I said, beginning to understand. Have you? Kyle turned to me with something that might have been a smile, though it was hard to read his alien features. No, Daniel Hayes, we have not. We have learned to manipulate matter and energy. We have mastered space and time. We have conquered death and disease. But we never learned how to fill the emptiness inside us. We never learned how to create meaning or purpose or love that lasts. We have everything except the one thing that makes existence bearable. God, I whispered. God, Cale agreed. The one thing we cannot engineer or manufacture or logic into existence. And now my people are drowning in despair, and I am watching them die while still breathing. The weight of what Cale was telling me settled over the sanctuary like a shroud. I watched him standing there by the altar, this being from across the stars, who had everything my species dreamed of achieving, and all I could see was brokenness. Tell me about the fall, I said softly. Tell me what happened to your people. Cale was silent for a long moment, and the light within him dimmed until he was barely glowing at all. When he spoke again, his voice carried a heaviness that made the air itself feel thick. It started with the children, he said. That's how we first knew something was deeply wrong. Our young ones stopped playing. They would receive every advantage, every educational enhancement, every opportunity we could provide, and they would simply exist. They went through the motions of learning and growing, but there was no joy in it. No wonder, no curiosity that came from the soul rather than mere programming. He moved to one of the pews and sat down heavily, as if the memory itself was a physical burden. We told ourselves it was a phase, a generational adaptation to our advanced society. We created therapies, designed social programs, engineered neural adjustments to stimulate pleasure responses. Nothing worked, because we were treating symptoms while ignoring the disease. What disease? I asked, though I was beginning to understand. Meaninglessness, Cale said simply. We had removed the foundation of purpose from existence. When you know that you are a random accident of chemistry and physics, when you understand that consciousness is just neurons firing in patterns, when you can reduce love to oxytocin and dopamine, when you can explain every mystery and there is nothing sacred left. What reason is there to live? What reason is there to do anything? He looked at me with those enormous eyes, and I saw reflected in them a pain so vast it made my own struggles seem insignificant. We became the first civilization in the galaxy to achieve immortality and then desperately seek death. The words hung in the air between us. I felt cold despite my jacket, cold in a way that had nothing to do with temperature. The suicide rate among my people is 93%, Cale continued, and I could hear him struggling to keep his voice steady. 93%, Daniel. That means almost everyone who reaches their 1,000th year of life chooses to end it, not because of suffering or pain. We eliminated those. They choose death because they cannot bear another day of meaningless existence. My God, I whispered. Yes, Cale said. Your God. The God my people abandoned. The God who would have given them a reason to live if only they had remembered him. He stood and began to pace, his movements agitated now, the light within him flickering like a strobe. And it gets worse. Those who don't choose suicide often descend into what we call the forgetting. It's a form of madness where the mind simply shuts down to protect itself from the horror of infinite meaningless existence. They become shells, bodies that breathe and move, but contain no person anymore. We have billions of them now, warehoused in facilities, tended by machines, existing, but not living. I thought about my own struggles with depression after my divorce, the nights when I couldn't see the point of going on, when everything seemed dark and hopeless. But I'd had faith to anchor me. I'd had prayer. I'd had the belief that my life had purpose in God's plan, even when I couldn't see it. What must it be like to face that darkness with no anchor at all, with the absolute certainty that nothing meant anything? We tried everything, Cale said, and I could hear desperation in his voice. We created virtual realities indistinguishable from physical reality, thinking people could find meaning in constructed worlds. But you cannot fool the soul. We developed drugs that stimulated religious experiences, trying to artificially recreate faith. But manufactured transcendence is just another kind of emptiness. We even attempted to create artificial gods, advanced artificial intelligences that could serve as objects of worship. But my people recognized them for what they were, and you cannot find meaning in worshiping something you built yourself. He stopped pacing and faced me directly. Do you understand what I'm telling you, Daniel? My people achieved everything your scientists dream about. We can manipulate individual atoms. We can fold space and move between dimensions. We can transfer consciousness between bodies. We have become masters of physical reality, and it has destroyed us. Because you lost God, I said. Because we chose to lose God, Cale corrected. That's the terrible truth. It wasn't taken from us. We walked away deliberately. We called it progress. We called it enlightenment. We called it growing up. And now we're paying the price. He moved closer to me, and I could feel something radiating from him, some kind of energy that made my skin tingle. There are still a few of us who remember, the remnant. We gather in secret and pray to the Creator our people have forgotten. We study the old texts that have been archived and ignored. We try to keep the flame alive. But we are so few, Daniel. So few against so many who have chosen the darkness. Why haven't you died? I asked. If so many choose suicide, why are you still here? Cale's light pulsed brighter for just a moment, because I still have hope. Because I believe that if I can find the way back to God, I can show my people the path. Because I refuse to let my entire civilization end in despair, without at least trying to save them. He reached out and placed one of his long-fingered hands on my shoulder. The touch was gentle, but sent waves of sensation through my body, like electricity and ice and fire all at once. That's why I came to Earth, Daniel Hayes, because I heard that humanity still prays, still believes, still maintains that connection we lost millions of years ago. I came here to learn how to find my way back home. His hand remained on my shoulder, and through that touch, I could feel the urgency of what he needed to say next. The dawn light was growing stronger now, painting the stained glass windows in brilliant colors, but the beauty of it felt almost mocking given the darkness of what Kyle was revealing. "But that's not the only reason I came," Kyle said, and something in his tone made my blood run cold. "I came because I've been watching your world for the past 50 of your years. And Daniel, I see my people's mistakes being repeated here. I see humanity walking the exact same path that led to our destruction." I pulled back slightly, looking up at him. "What do you mean?" "Look at your world," Kyle said, gesturing around us even though we were enclosed in the church. "Look at what's happening to humanity. Your churches are emptying. Your young people are abandoning faith in record numbers. Your scientists speak of God the way my people once did, as a quaint idea that we've outgrown. You're beginning to worship your technology the same way we did." He moved to the window again, looking out at the small town beginning to wake up in the early morning light. "You call them smartphones, these devices that have become extensions of your bodies. You trust algorithms more than instinct. You seek validation from digital networks rather than from real community. You're beginning to prefer virtual connection over physical presence. You're taking your first steps down the road we traveled, and you have no idea where it leads." "But we haven't abandoned God," I protested. "There are still billions of believers on Earth. Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Hinduism." "For now," Kyle interrupted, and his voice was gentle but firm. "But I've watched the trajectory, Daniel. I've seen the statistics. In your most advanced nations, religious affiliation drops with each generation. Your universities teach that faith is the enemy of reason. Your entertainment mocks believers as naive or dangerous. Your children are being raised to think that science has disproven God, that faith is for the weak-minded who cannot accept a cold, purposeless universe." He turned back to me, and I saw something like desperation in his eyes. "Don't you see? This is exactly how it began for us. First, the intellectuals abandoned faith, claiming it was incompatible with knowledge. Then the general population followed, embarrassed to be associated with something considered primitive. Then the children grew up never knowing there was anything beyond the material world. And then came the emptiness, the despair, the realization that we had traded meaning for knowledge and gotten a terrible bargain. I wanted to argue, to defend humanity, but the words stuck in my throat, because I'd seen it too. I'd watched my own congregation shrink over the years. I'd performed funerals where the deceased's children didn't want any mention of God or afterlife, just a celebration of life that felt hollow and sad. I'd counseled teenagers who told me they wanted to believe but couldn't, because their teachers had convinced them that science had explained everything and left no room for the divine. Your suicide rates are rising, Kyle continued, and each word felt like a hammer blow. Especially among your young people. Depression and anxiety are at epidemic levels. Your people report feeling more isolated and lonely than ever before, despite being more connected through technology than at any point in your history. You're medicating the symptoms because you refuse to acknowledge the disease. And what is the disease? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Spiritual starvation, Kale said. You're cutting yourselves off from the source of meaning and purpose, and you're trying to fill the void with entertainment and achievement and material comfort. But it doesn't work. It never works. My people tried for thousands of years to fill that void with everything except God, and we failed. You will fail too if you continue on this path. He moved closer to me, and I could feel the intensity of his conviction radiating from him. I came to Earth to warn you, Daniel. I came because I cannot bear to watch another species make the same catastrophic mistake mine did. You still have time. You still have churches like this one where people gather to pray. You still have believers who maintain their faith despite the mockery and pressure. You still have that connection to the Creator that we lost. But for how much longer? I said, and hearing myself say it out loud made something break open inside me. You're right. I see it too. I've been watching my congregation age and die and not be replaced. I watch young people grow up in the church and then leave for college and never come back. I see the culture shifting away from faith and toward what? Toward nothing? Toward the void, Kale said quietly. Toward the same emptiness that consumed my people. And I'm telling you, as someone who has lived through that void, who has watched billions of souls extinguish themselves because they could not bear the meaninglessness, you do not want to go there. The path you're on leads to extinction, not of your bodies, but of everything that makes you human. I sat down heavily in the pew, my mind reeling. An alien had traveled across the galaxy to warn humanity that we were destroying ourselves spiritually. The absurdity of it would have made me laugh if the truth of it wasn't so devastating. What can we do? I asked. How do we stop it? Kale looked at me with something that might have been hope mixed with sorrow. That's what I'm still trying to understand. That's why I've been visiting churches across your world, listening to prayers, trying to understand what you still have that we lost. Because, Daniel, if I can figure out how to save your species, maybe I can learn how to save mine. The weight of everything Kale had told me pressed down on my chest until I could barely breathe. I stood up from the pew, needing to move, to pace, to do something with the energy coursing through my body. My entire theological framework was collapsing and rebuilding itself simultaneously, and the questions came pouring out of me like water from a broken dam. The Bible, I said, my voice shaking. Are you in the Bible? Are aliens mentioned anywhere in Scripture? Because I've read it cover to cover dozens of times, and I never saw anything about extraterrestrial life. Kale tilted his head in that unnervingly human gesture. Are you certain you never saw it? Or did you simply not recognize it for what it was? What do you mean? He moved to the altar and picked up the worn Bible that always sat there, the one I used for services. His long fingers handled it with surprising gentleness, with reverence even. Your prophet Ezekiel. He describes a vision of wheels within wheels, covered in eyes, descending from the sky in fire and light. Beings with 4 faces, wings that sounded like rushing waters. What was he seeing, Daniel? Angels, I said automatically. He was seeing angels. Was he? Kyle opened the Bible, though I doubted he needed to read it. Or was he seeing something his mind couldn't fully comprehend, and he described it using the only frame of reference he had? When your ancestors saw technology they didn't understand, when they encountered beings from beyond their world, they called them angels or demons, or gods, because those were the only categories they had. He set the Bible down and looked at me directly. I'm not saying angels don't exist, I'm saying that some of what your ancestors recorded as angelic encounters may have been contact with other physical beings from other worlds. The divine and the extraterrestrial are not mutually exclusive categories, Daniel. We are all God's creation. The implications of what he was saying made my head spin. So God created other worlds? Other species? It's not just Earth and humanity? Did you truly believe, Cale asked gently, that the creator of infinite space, with its hundreds of billions of galaxies, each containing hundreds of billions of stars, with countless planets orbiting those stars, that he created all of that just as decoration for one small blue world? That seems like a waste of resources, doesn't it? Very unlike an efficient creator. I had no answer for that. He was right. It had always seemed strange to me that the universe was so incomprehensibly vast yet apparently empty, except for us. But I'd never questioned it too deeply, because it wasn't in the Bible. And what wasn't in the Bible wasn't part of Orthodox theology. How many? I asked. How many species are out there? More than I could count in your lifetime, Cale said. The universe is teeming with life, Daniel. Most of it is simple, microbial, still evolving. But there are thousands of intelligent species at various stages of development. Some are younger than humanity, still discovering fire and the wheel. Others are ancient beyond your comprehension, having existed for billions of years. And they all worship God? I asked. They all know about the Creator? Cale's light dimmed. They all began that way. Every species that achieves consciousness seems to start with an innate awareness of the divine, a sense that they are part of something greater. But not all maintain that connection. My people lost it. Others have as well. Some never develop it beyond primitive superstition. But yes, across the cosmos, there is a universal truth that echoes through creation. There is a Creator, and we are His children. I thought about the cross behind the altar, about Jesus dying for humanity's sins. But what about salvation? What about Jesus Christ? Did God send His Son to other worlds too? That, Cale said carefully, is a question I've pondered for centuries. Your Christ taught that He came for the lost sheep of Israel, but His message spread to all humanity. Perhaps His sacrifice was not limited to one species. Perhaps the act of God becoming flesh and dying for His creation echoed across all of existence. Or perhaps each world receives the revelation it needs in the form it can understand. I don't have all the answers, Daniel. I'm still searching for many of them myself. He moved closer to me, and I could see my reflection in his large, dark eyes. But here's what I do know. The love of the Creator is not limited by space or species. His desire for connection with His children extends across all of creation. The same God you pray to, I pray to. The same longing for meaning and purpose that drives humans, drives my people and countless others. We are all seeking the same thing, to know our Creator and to be known by Him. The government, I said suddenly, another question exploding in my mind. Does our government know about you? About other species? Cale was quiet for a moment, and in that silence, I felt a chill run down my spine. Yes, he finally said. Your governments have known for decades. They have made contact. They have hidden the truth from you. Why? I demanded. Why would they hide something like this? Because the truth threatens their power, Cale said, and there was anger in his voice now, barely contained. Think about what would happen if humanity learned the truth, Daniel. If people knew that the universe was full of God's children, that Earth was just one small part of an infinite creation, how would that change things? Would people still obey arbitrary borders? Would they still fight wars over resources when they knew abundance existed beyond their world? Would they still accept the authority of leaders who had lied to them about the fundamental nature of reality? He gestured around the church. And what about institutions like this? If people knew that God's creation extended across billions of worlds, that revelation came in many forms to many species, how would that affect religious authority? The powerful fear losing control, so they suppress the truth and keep humanity isolated and ignorant. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. I stumbled backward, gripping the edge of a pew to steady myself. You're telling me this is a conspiracy? That our leaders know about alien life and are deliberately hiding it from us? Not just hiding it, Cale said, and his voice carried a bitterness I hadn't heard before. Actively suppressing it, discrediting witnesses, confiscating evidence, creating a culture of mockery around the subject so that anyone who claims to have seen something is automatically dismissed as crazy or attention-seeking. They've turned the greatest truth in human history into a joke. He began to pace again, his movements more agitated now. It started in your year 1947. A craft from another world crashed in your New Mexico desert. Your military recovered it, along with the bodies of its occupants. They studied the technology, back-engineered what they could, and then they made a choice. Instead of revealing the truth to humanity, they buried it. They created false narratives, spread disinformation, and began a campaign of secrecy that continues to this day. I wanted to dismiss it as paranoid fantasy, but the certainty in his voice, the specificity of his claims, made that impossible. Why would they do that? Why not just tell people the truth? Because they understood the implications, Cale said, turning to face me. Your leaders, the ones who truly hold power, they recognized immediately that this knowledge would destabilize everything. Think about it, Daniel. What happens to nationalism when people realize we're all one species on one small planet? What happens to economic systems built on scarcity when technology exists that could provide abundance? What happens to religious institutions that claim exclusive access to divine truth when the cosmos reveals that God's creation is infinitely larger than they taught? He moved to the window, looking out at the town waking up to another ordinary day, completely unaware of the extraordinary conversation happening in this small church. They made contact with other species, established communication protocols, traded technology in exchange for permission to keep humanity ignorant. Some of those species were benevolent, hoping humanity would eventually be ready for the truth. Others were more than happy to exploit your isolation. You're saying there's been ongoing contact for decades? The implications were staggering. Since the 1950s, Cale confirmed, your government, along with a few others, the Russians, the British, the Chinese, they've had regular contact. They've acquired technology they don't fully understand. They've learned about galactic civilizations and political structures that span star systems. And they've kept it all secret because knowledge is power, and they refuse to share that power with the people they claim to serve. I thought about all the UFO sightings I'd heard about over the years, the grainy videos, the eyewitness accounts from military personnel, the way it was all treated as entertainment or delusion. The ridicule, the stigma around UFOs and aliens, manufactured, Cale said, deliberately created to ensure that even when people see the truth with their own eyes, they won't speak about it for fear of being mocked. Your intelligence agencies have spent billions of your dollars creating a culture where the truth is indistinguishable from fantasy. They've done their job very well. He turned back to me, and I could see something like sadness in his expression. And the religious institutions, Daniel, they've been complicit too. Not all of them, not consciously perhaps, but they've benefited from keeping people's spiritual horizons limited. If humans understood that God's creation extends across billions of worlds, that other species worship the same Creator, that revelation comes in many forms, how would that affect the power structures built on claiming exclusive access to salvation? The accusation stung because there was truth in it. I thought about the narrow theology I'd been taught in seminary, the insistence that our interpretation was the only correct one, the way we drew boundaries around who was saved and who wasn't. Had we been defending truth or defending our own authority? There are people in your churches, in your government, in your scientific institutions who know the truth, Cale continued. But they've been silenced or discredited. The few brave enough to speak out are destroyed professionally and personally. The system protects itself ruthlessly. Why are you telling me this? I asked. What am I supposed to do with this information? I'm just a small-town pastor. Nobody listens to me about anything important. Kyle moved toward me, his presence suddenly overwhelming in its intensity. Because the small-town pastors are the ones who still have congregations that trust them. Because the people who maintain faith despite the culture turning against them are the ones who might be ready to hear a larger truth. Because the collapse is coming, Daniel, whether your leaders want it or not. What collapse? The truth cannot be suppressed forever, Cale said. Too many people are seeing things that can't be explained away. Your own military is beginning to release evidence they can no longer deny. The dam is cracking, and when it breaks, humanity will face a crisis of understanding, unlike anything in your history. Every institution, every belief system, every assumption about your place in the cosmos will be challenged simultaneously. He placed both hands on my shoulders now, and I felt that electric connection again, stronger this time. When that happens, people will need guides. They'll need people who can help them integrate the cosmic truth with their spiritual truth. They'll need shepherds who understand that God is bigger than they imagined, but no less real. They'll need someone to tell them that learning about other worlds doesn't diminish the love of the Creator. It magnifies it. You think I'm supposed to be one of those guides? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. I think you're one of the few people who could be, Kyle said. You've seen me. You've heard my story. You know now that the universe is full of God's children, and that knowledge can either destroy your faith or transform it into something vast and beautiful. Which will you choose? The question hung in the air between us, and I realized that everything had been leading to this moment, this choice, this impossible, terrifying, world-shattering choice. My hands were trembling, and I pulled away from Cale's touch, needing space to think, to breathe, to process what was being asked of me. You're asking me to tell people about this, I said, pacing now between the pews, to stand up in front of my congregation, in front of anyone who'll listen and tell them that aliens are real, that our government has been lying to us, that everything we thought we knew about our place in the universe is wrong. Not wrong, Cale corrected gently. Incomplete. Your faith isn't false, Daniel. It's just smaller than it needs to be. And yes, I'm asking you to help expand it, to prepare people for the truth that's coming whether they're ready or not. I laughed, and it came out bitter and broken. They'll think I've lost my mind. They'll say I had a breakdown after the divorce, that the stress finally got to me. I'll lose my church, my credibility, everything I've worked for. Who's going to believe a small-town pastor claiming he met an alien praying in his church at 3 a.m? Perhaps no one, Kyle admitted. Perhaps everyone will dismiss you as insane. But Daniel, Your species is standing at a crossroads, and the choice you make in the next few years will determine whether you survive or follow my people into spiritual extinction. He moved to the center of the sanctuary, and as the dawn light grew stronger through the stained glass, his form seemed to shimmer and pulse with an inner radiance. I've been watching Earth for 50 of your years, and I've seen the acceleration. Every decade, your technology advances faster. Every year, more of your people abandon faith for materialism. Every generation grows more isolated despite being more connected. You're approaching the critical point that my people passed millions of years ago, the point where you have enough knowledge to destroy yourselves and not enough wisdom to save yourselves. But you said Earth is special, I protested, grasping for hope. You said we still have something your people lost. You do, Kale said, and his voice filled with something that sounded like longing. You still pray with your whole hearts. You still gather in places like this and seek the face of God. You still create art and music and poetry dedicated to the glory of the Creator. You still fall in love and build families and find meaning in sacrifice and service. You still have living faith, Daniel, not just intellectual acknowledgement of religious facts. He gestured around the church, at the worn pews and simple altar, at the cross hanging on the wall. Do you know how rare that is? How precious? My people have tried for thousands of years to recreate what you have, and we can't, because faith cannot be manufactured or engineered. It must be freely given and freely received. It requires humility and trust and a willingness to believe in something greater than yourself. And those qualities, those beautiful, essential qualities, are exactly what your culture is teaching you to abandon. I sank into a pew, the weight of it all crushing down on me. So what do you want from me? What am I supposed to do? Kyle sat beside me, and despite his alien appearance, there was something comforting about his presence. I want you to make a choice. You can stay silent, return to your life, pretend this never happened. Tell yourself it was a dream or a hallucination. Many would make that choice, and I wouldn't judge them for it. The burden of this truth is heavy. Or, I asked, though I already knew what the alternative was. Or you can speak, Kale said simply. You can tell your congregation what you witnessed. You can share the truth that God's creation is vaster than they imagined. You can warn them about the path humanity is on. You can help prepare people for the revelation that's coming. And yes, many will reject you. Many will mock you. But some will listen, Daniel. Some will hear the truth in your words and begin to ask the questions that need to be asked. He leaned forward, his large eyes reflecting my own troubled face. Your species needs people who can bridge the gap between faith and cosmic reality. You need shepherds who can help people understand that learning about extraterrestrial life doesn't diminish God. It reveals His infinite creativity. You need voices that can say, yes, we are small, but we are not insignificant. Yes, the universe is vast, but we are still beloved children of the Creator. And if I choose to speak, I asked, if I tell them everything you've told me, what then? Then you become a voice crying in the wilderness, preparing the way, Kale said. You join others like you across your world who are trying to help humanity navigate this transition. And when the dam breaks, when the truth can no longer be hidden, your people will have guides who already understand, who can help them integrate this new reality with their faith, rather than letting it destroy their faith. I thought about my congregation, Mrs. Patterson, who'd been coming to this church for 60 years, young Tommy Chen, who was just beginning to ask deep questions about God. Sarah Williams, who'd found faith after her husband's death and clung to it like a lifeline. How would they react if I stood up on Sunday and told them what had happened tonight? "I'm scared," I admitted, and saying it out loud made tears spring to my eyes. "I'm terrified of losing everything, of being alone." "I know," Cale said softly, and I felt waves of empathy radiating from him. "I left my entire world behind to search for truth. I've been mocked by my own people, called insane for clinging to faith in a creator they've forgotten. I understand fear, Daniel, but I also understand that some truths are worth the cost of speaking them." He stood, and I realized with a jolt that the sun was rising. The night was ending. "I have to go," Kyle said, and there was regret in his voice. "The sun is rising, and I cannot be seen in your daylight. There are those who watch, who would report my presence, and I'm not ready for that confrontation yet." I stood quickly, suddenly desperate for him not to leave. Not yet. Not when I had so many questions still unanswered. "Wait. When will I see you again? How do I contact you? What if I need—" "You won't see me again," Cale said gently, cutting off my desperate questions. "This was our one meeting, Daniel. I've given you what I came to give. The rest is up to you." The finality of it hit me like a punch to the gut. But I don't know what to do. I don't know how to carry this. I don't know if I'm strong enough. Cale moved toward me one last time and placed his hand over my heart. The touch sent warmth flooding through my entire body, and for just a moment, I felt connected to something vast and infinite and beautiful. "You are stronger than you know, and you're not alone. There are others across your world who have had encounters like this, who carry similar burdens. You'll find each other when the time is right." He stepped back, and the light within him began to pulse more rapidly. "I want to thank you, Daniel Hayes, for maintaining this house of prayer, for keeping the flame alive even when it felt like you were the only one who cared. Do you know how many churches I've visited across your world? Thousands. Tens of thousands. And most of them are empty. Not physically empty, but spiritually empty. Buildings where people gather out of habit or social obligation, where prayers are recited without meaning, where God's presence is no longer welcomed or expected." His voice grew softer, more intimate. "But here, in this small church in this small town, there is still light. Real light. The kind that comes from genuine seeking, from honest prayer, from a heart that still hungers for the divine. That's rare, Daniel. More rare than you can possibly understand. Don't ever think that what you do here doesn't matter. It matters more than you know." Tears were streaming down my face now, and I didn't try to hide them. I don't feel like I'm doing anything special. Most days I feel like I'm failing. The congregation is shrinking. The culture is turning against everything I believe, and I can't even keep my own life together. "That's because you measure success by human standards," Kyle said. "But the Creator measures differently. He sees the faithfulness in the small things. He sees the prayers offered in the darkness when no one else is watching. He sees the love you pour into a congregation of 30 souls who actually need you more than a congregation of 3,000 who come for entertainment." The light within him was growing brighter now, almost painful to look at directly. "I've seen civilizations that spanned galaxies. I've witnessed empires that controlled thousands of worlds. I've met beings with power beyond your comprehension. And I've learned that none of it matters if the heart is empty. Your small church, with its worn pews and off-key singing, matters more than all the technological wonders my people achieved, because here, God is still real. Here, people still seek His face. Here, the connection hasn't been severed. What will you do now? I asked, trying to memorize every detail of him, knowing I'd never see anything like him again. Where will you go? Back to my people, Cale said. Back to the remnant. I'll share what I've learned here, the hope I've found in humanity's continuing faith. Maybe it will help us find our way back. Maybe not. But at least I'll die knowing that somewhere in this vast universe, there are still children of God who remember their Father's name. He moved toward the center of the sanctuary, and the air around him began to shimmer and distort. Remember what I told you, Daniel. Your species is at a crossroads. The choice you make, the choice your civilization makes in the next few decades, will determine whether you survive spiritually or follow my people into the void. Use your voice wisely. Speak truth even when it costs you. And never, never let go of the connection you have to your Creator. Because once it's lost, it's almost impossible to find again. Wait, I said, one last desperate question forming. Your people, the Korra, is there any hope for them? Can they be saved? Cale was silent for a long moment, and the light around him pulsed in patterns that seemed to express emotions I had no words for. I don't know, he finally said, and the honesty of it was almost more devastating than a negative answer would have been. But I have to believe there is. I have to believe that no matter how far we fall, no matter how completely we lose ourselves, the Creator still reaches out for His lost children. That's what faith means, isn't it? Believing in hope even when all evidence suggests despair? Yes, I whispered. That's exactly what it means. Then pray for us, Cale said. Pray for my people the way I've been praying for yours. Maybe prayer transcends space and time. Maybe it reaches further than we can imagine. Maybe somewhere in the vast machinery of creation, our prayers for each other will echo and amplify and somehow, impossibly, bring healing to broken worlds. The light around him intensified until I had to shield my eyes. Goodbye, Daniel Hayes. Thank you for listening. Thank you for believing. Thank you for keeping the flame alive. Wait, I shouted, but it was too late. There was a flash of light so bright it seared itself into my retinas, a sound like 1,000 voices singing a single note, and a sensation of air rushing to fill a suddenly empty space. And then, he was gone. The sanctuary was empty except for me, standing alone in the morning light streaming through the stained glass windows. I stood there for a long time, maybe minutes, maybe hours. My sense of time had been shattered along with everything else. Eventually, I walked slowly to the altar where Cale had been kneeling and praying. I knelt in the same spot, feeling the worn wood beneath my knees, and I prayed. Not the careful, structured prayers I usually offered, not the theological, sophisticated prayers I'd learned in seminary. I prayed like a child, messy and desperate and real. God, I said out loud, my voice breaking. I don't know what to do with this. I don't know if I'm strong enough to carry it. I don't know if anyone will believe me. But if this was real, if Cale was real, if everything he told me was true, then show me what to do next. Show me how to help. Show me how to be faithful with this impossible knowledge. The church was silent. No voice from heaven answered. No sign appeared. But sitting there in that silence, I felt something shift inside me. Not certainty exactly, but something like it. A quiet knowing that whatever I chose, whatever path I took from this moment forward, I wouldn't be walking it alone. I stayed there until my knees ached and the sun was fully risen. When I finally stood and walked out of the church, everything looked exactly the same as it had the night before. The same small town, the same quiet streets, the same ordinary world continuing its ordinary rhythms. But I was different. I was carrying a weight that would never leave me, a truth that would color every sermon I preached, every conversation I had, every moment of the rest of my life. I'd been changed by an encounter with something beyond my understanding, and there was no going back to the comfortable ignorance I'd lived in before. As I walked back to my house, I thought about Sunday's sermon, about standing in front of my congregation and deciding what to say, how much to reveal, whether to speak the truth or protect them from it. The choice Cale had given me wasn't really a choice at all, I realized, because how could I stay silent after what I'd witnessed? How could I pretend that the universe was small and simple when I'd met living proof that it was vast and complex and full of God's children? I didn't know what would happen when I spoke, didn't know if they'd believe me or reject me, if I'd keep my church or lose everything. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty. Cale had traveled across the galaxy to deliver a warning to humanity, to offer hope to a species standing at the edge of spiritual extinction. And I, Daniel Hayes, small-town pastor with a shrinking congregation and a broken life, had been chosen to hear that message. Now I had to decide what to do with it. The sun continued to rise over the quiet town, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. Somewhere out there, beyond those morning clouds, beyond the atmosphere, beyond the stars I couldn't see in the daylight, Kyle was traveling back to his people, carrying his own burden, his own hope, his own desperate prayer for salvation. We were both messengers now, separated by impossible distances, but united in the same mission: to speak truth in a universe full of lies, to maintain faith in a culture of doubt, to keep the flame alive when everything conspired to extinguish it. I unlocked my front door and stepped inside, already feeling the weight of the choice I knew I would make. Because Cale was right about one thing: some truths are worth the cost of speaking them, and I was about to find out exactly how much that cost would be.